Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining me today for this presentation on cultural change that will focus on how cultural change was successfully implemented for the world's most innovative and advanced organization, Apple Inc. As we go through this presentation, I will begin with an introduction into cultural change along with my hypothesis statement. Then I will give a brief history of Apple Inc. and why it was in need of a drastic change. We will discuss the transition of Apple Computers Inc. to simply Apple Inc. This signified their emergence into the diverse digital age and the change jobs created in the culture of the organization, and ultimately how that change was sustained. Finally, I will review the limitations of the study and my recommendations for Apple Inc. Now let's get started. First, we are going to look at the difference between culture and climate within an organization. I'm assuming most of you viewing this presentation are in the consumer industry, so I'm sure you've had those surveys within your organizations that ask questions such as, do you know what's expected of you? Do you agree your opinions matter? Do you feel you're getting the training you need to perform your job? Etc., etc. You answer it truthfully and you think, wow, my company is going to change. Well, maybe not. These questions are designed to change the climate of an organization, not the culture. And even though changing the climate is important, if you do not ultimately change the culture, in the end, the change will not be successful. Now to dig into the difference between the two. Climate is the shared perceptions and attitudes about an organization. The climate can be described as the mood of an organization. Now, we all know people's moods can change daily or even hourly, depending on what is happening at any given moment. The same is true for the climate. It is constantly changing. The culture, on the other hand, are the shared beliefs and assumptions in an organization. These are the unwritten rules. These are the famous words I'm sure you've all heard. This is the way we've always done it. In contrast to the mood or the climate, the culture can be described as the personality of the organization. Unlike mood, the personality is very difficult to change. As Edgar Schein once said, 90% of our behavior in organization is driven by cultural rules. This is why it is so important when organizations are implementing change, they are implementing a change in the culture, not the climate. This presentation is going to examine the following hypothesis. There is no correct formula, strategy, or sequence of events for an organization to successfully undergo a change in their culture to stay relevant and successful in today's ever-changing technological market. The organization must simply have the need for change. They must have the right change leader in place, and both of these must happen at the right time for that specific organization. Now that we know the difference between culture and climate, and I have stated my hypothesis, let's jump into the specifics of Apple Inc. A brief history of Apple. Apple Computer Inc. was founded in 1976. The founders were Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. In that same year, the Apple I was unveiled at the Home Brew Computer Club and put on sale for $666.66. Into the 1980s, Apple Computers Inc. continued to see success and surpassed $1 million in sales. However, difficult times lay ahead. In 1983, the Apple Lisa was introduced for a staggering retail price of $10,000, and it was a complete flop. In 1985, after conflicts with the CEO, Steve Jobs left the company. Into the 1990s, Apple Computers Inc. continued to struggle to develop innovative and cost-effective products for its consumers. In 1997, stock prices dropped to an all-time low of $3.30 per share. Apple was in desperate need of a savior. With only 3 months of capital left in the bank, they called on Steve Jobs to return and save the struggling company. Immediately, Jobs began a revolutionary change to the organization culture. He implemented a closed-door policy to prevent Apple's projects from being leaked and to protect the technology they were developing. Jobs changed the organizational structure, having employees report directly to him instead of going through multiple levels of management. Then, maybe one of the most significant changes, Jobs announced they would begin expanding their product line within the electronics industry. This included the iPod, iPhone, and iPad. In 2007, Jobs officially announced that Apple Computers, Inc. would be renamed Apple Inc. This was to signify that Apple was no longer just a computer manufacturer. Now, after all of this, as I checked the stock market 10 minutes before this presentation began, Apple Inc. shares are sitting at a little over $250, $253.30 to be exact. While Apple is one of the world's leading organizations and continues to grow, it is important to understand the company's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Here is the SWOT analysis. The strengths are noticeable and easy to point out. Apple Inc. continues to strengthen its research and development capabilities and remains competitive with new products. They continue to reach their consumers in different distribution channels, ranging from small and mid-sized businesses to large government markets. Their financial performance is stronger than ever. In 2018, revenues continued to grow over prior years as sales reached $265 million. This is an increase of 16% over fiscal year 2017. Even though Apple Inc. seems to be checking all the boxes for a successful company, there are still some weaknesses that must be addressed. There are legal proceedings that could hamper the ease of doing business in China, as Apple's third largest market is imposing a ban on the sale of various iPhone models. There are also legal disputes with Weiland over patent infringement, where Apple was ordered to pay $145 million in damages, as well as another $502 million for infringing on VirNetX's or VPN and DNS technologies. Apple's revenue is also largely dependent on the iPhone and the iPad, as it accounts for 70% of total revenue. If there is a future decline in growth rates of these two products, this could affect the overall revenue for the company. However, there are still opportunities for Apple to grow, especially in artificial intelligence, or what we all know as Siri. Artificial intelligence, though, is not just Siri. It also includes Face ID biometrics and the portrait mode within the camera, and continuing to develop these can only benefit Apple in the long run, as consumers become more dependent on technology. Apple can also continue to invest in health tech, such as the iWatch, as consumers become increasingly conscious of their health. Finally, the threats to Apple. One of the biggest threats, of course, is the trade war between the US and China. Apple imports various components for the iPhone through China, and because of these increased costs in components due to the tariffs, these costs could ultimately be passed to the consumers. There is also an intensifying rivalry between Apple and its competitors. As Apple continues to innovate and produce high-quality merchandise, other companies such as Samsung, HP, and Dell are all doing the same. Now let's look at how Jobs' change in the culture of Apple Inc. follows the 8-stage process outlined by John Cotter. Stage 1. Develop a sense of urgency. First, a sense of urgency was established during the years of 1989 to 1996, when Apple Inc. sales and stock shares were in a decline. When Jobs returned in 1997 with his new company Next, there was an upcoming release date, which was Apple's window of opportunity, that created yet another sense of urgency. Step 2. Form a powerful guiding coalition. Jobs had formed a powerful guiding coalition even before his return to Apple from when he left in the first place. The employees that left with Jobs to work on Next were still with him when he returned to Apple, which made even more employees loyal to Jobs and his mission. Step 3. Develop a vision and a strategy. Developing Next was part of Jobs' new vision to bringing affordable computing to universities in order for students to benefit from advanced lab hardware, which was unaffordable prior to this. Step 4. Communicate the vision. Jobs continued to communicate his vision throughout the entire process again and again. He never let the employees forget or veer off course from the original mission. Step 5. Remove obstacles. Jobs identified high performance and out-of-the-box thinkers and placed them in top positions. This is how he was able to remove obstacles and allow innovation to flourish. Step 6. Create short-term wins. Jobs made it a part of the culture to begin innovation as soon as a product was released. He then rewarded his employees by allowing them to work with the most talented and thus giving them a sense of satisfaction, or in their eyes, a win. Step 7. Do not declare victory too soon. Even though Apple Inc. was financially successful and one of the top technology companies in the world, Jobs was not cocky. He was smart enough to know there was still more change and more innovation that could happen and did not let competition creep in the back door. Step 8. Anchor changes into the corporation's culture. Jobs promoted the most talented, most creative, and most competent, not necessarily who he liked the most. This became the culture of Apple Inc. Now that we see the process Jobs went through to change the culture in Apple Inc., let's explore some ideas on how that culture change was sustained. Keeping the momentum. Apple has a history of innovation. The company has a knack for pairing new technology with innovative business models, such as iTunes and Apple's App Store. Jobs and his team were able to successfully create new technology that consumers wanted again and again. Choosing successors. Apple Inc. announced Tim Cook as CEO, replacing Jobs. He was a longtime chief operating officer, which made him part of the culture Jobs created. According to Burke, you do not want to choose a successor that is too different from the company, meaning someone who is 100% from the outside. You also do not want someone who is stuck in their old ways and too much a part of the company before the culture change. For the change momentum to continue, an organization needs a leader that is similar to the incumbent but different enough to keep evolving. Launching new initiatives. Apple Inc. is using what competitors are doing to launch new initiative. Executives get out of the office and take a look around, something that Jobs and now Tim are doing constantly. Also, if a new idea or project isn't working out, Apple Inc. does not waste time or money on it. They are okay with taking it as a loss and moving on to the next project. Apple Inc.'s mission statement. Apple designs Macs, the best personal computers in the world, along with OS X, iLife, iWork, and professional software. Apple leads the digital music revolution with its iPods and iTunes online store. Apple has reinvented the mobile phone with its revolutionary iPhone and App Store, and is defining the future for mobile media and computing devices with iPad. I would not change Apple's mission statement, as I believe it states a purpose that clearly defines what the company is striving to achieve and fits with the culture Jobs created. Moving into the limitations of the study. While there is ample research and studies during Jobs' era, there are few that have been completed after his passing. Jobs' untimely death of cancer was emotional for many, which may be preventing anyone from wanting to write about Apple Inc. It could also be that since the change was so recent, not enough time has passed to complete thorough research. My recommendations to Apple: continue to innovate and provide quality merchandise. Continue with the leadership and culture Jobs created to stay on top as one of the leading organizations in technology. However, never be afraid to change. Thank you all for joining me during this presentation. I hope you have all enjoyed learning about the cultural change of Apple Inc. as much as I have enjoyed giving this presentation to you. Thank you and have a great day. This leads us to the nature of change. When Jobs returned to Apple Inc. in 1997, he began a revolutionary change within the organization. It was clear there were external forces, such as growing diversity in products, as well as internal forces, such as low market shares and very little remaining capital, that contributed to the need for change. While it is easy to differentiate that Apple Inc. went through a revolutionary change versus an evolutionary one, the framework for managing change is a little more complex. Van de Ven and Poole introduced 4 schools of thought to categorize the 4 ideal types of development theories. These 4 schools of thought are not discrete in reality. They can overlap with each other, ultimately creating 16 possible frameworks to explain organizational change and development. Apple Inc. is an overlap of dialectical and evolutionary theories. Dialectical theory states organization change occurs as 2 different points of view collide and some resolution is reached. This can be seen as Jobs' return as an advisor in 1997, and Apple acquires Jobs Software next to develop Apple products. According to Burke, the evolutionary theory assumes that organization change proceeds as in biological evolution, and according to a continuing cycle of variation, selection, and retention among organizations competing for resources in a designated marketplace or environment. This can be seen in Apple Inc. as they are competing with Samsung, Dell, and HP with the same products, such as cell phones and tablets, and within the same market, the same consumers. During the revolutionary change at Apple Inc., there is only one definite resistance to change that could have put the entire change on hold, which would have been the lack of followship. There have been multiple studies on the leadership style of Jobs, stating that he used fear to motivate employees and did not praise his employees for doing a good job. He instead pushed them even harder to be even better. This type of leadership is hard for many and could have caused Jobs to lose his followers. However, Jobs did a great job of making sure his employees' vision aligned with the company's vision, which made it easier for them to deal with the harsh leadership of Jobs. Levitt's model is a very easy to understand, yet says a lot about how different aspects of an organization are all interdependent on one another. The 4 major components, task, people, technology, and structure, all must interact with each other, and if one component changes, then the rest of the 3 would change as well, which I believe accurately describes the change Apple Inc. endured.